Hey everyone, have you ever worked anywhere that, it just has what appears to be like a bad culture, bad management, leaders that aren't supporting their staff, and it's led to, you know, employees and maybe even yourself feeling like, psychologically and emotionally drained and just unwell at work? It happens all the time. Well, in this video, my friend and colleague Ellen and I are actually going to talk about emotional well being at work and how, as upcoming HR professionals or HR professionals in the field already, that we can actually, promote a healthy psychological and emotional well being in the workplace. So, yeah, let's dive in. Hey, Ellen, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm good, John. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited about this discussion that we're going to have today.
Yeah.
But first, I was going to let you just kind of like introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am Ellen Puffer, and I am currently the HR director for the Chattanooga Tourism Company. So what we do here is we encourage visitors to come to Chattanooga either for leisure travel or with a meeting or a convention. And we're here to promote our communities, promote and develop visitor experiences for our community's social and economic prosperity. So I joined this team a little over a year and a half ago, and John and I have something in common in that we both work for smaller hospitality organizations, and have been responsible for really building an HR department, which is just each of us. So a department of one, sort of from the ground up, but I was really brought in to help them, change and create and maintain a really healthy culture, because my background, prior to joining the Chattanooga Tourism Company, I spent about 9 years in a sort of VP, COO, co-director role at a behavioral health organization. So what we did was we acquired government contracts to provide services to families who primarily had children in the foster care system. So we were working with them really closely on some of those therapeutic aspects of working. It was a challenging client basis, right? Because we were looking at
Mhm.
a lot of systemic issues, systemic poverty, systemic racism. Um, Generational poverty, things like that. So I am not a clinician. That is my other caveat. I do have, I'm a UTC alum, so I have
Go
a
Mocs.
bachelor's degree. Go Mox! I have a bachelor's degree in business administration from UTC, and I also have an MBA from UTC. I'm also a SHRM certified professional. So those are sort of my qualifications to be doing the things that I'm doing on top of a lot of years of experience sort of in behavioral health and hospitality. Because prior to behavioral health, I had a catering business, which was so much fun, but I'm so glad I don't have to work on the weekends anymore.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you for the introduction. And we do have a lot in common. It's
We
like
do.
with where we went to school and the type of work that we're currently doing.
I know it is.
Master's
It's
degree
it's a
from
little
UTC.
wild. Yeah.
So
but I don't have it in me to be a teacher. So you win on that one.
yeah, I don't know if I have it either. No, I'm just kidding. I enjoy it. Um, Yeah, I mean, I remember the first time I reached out to you, I think I was like, hey, we have stuff in common. We should be friends.
And I think I was like, cool, okay.
Yeah, we're like professional colleagues and whatever.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
um,
Which is just kind of how it works in the world of hospitality, right? You're like,
yeah,
hey, I've got something in common with you. Let's be friends.
yes. So, um, awesome. Well, so yeah, I know with this topic, I mean, I think you're the perfect person for me to talk to about it, right? With your background and just your knowledge. But As you and I have discussed, we're going to talk about psychological and emotional well-being of staff. And with that topic, I think it's a huge topic, right? And I think
Mhm,
it's always been a huge topic related to just staff being taken care of, right?
mhm,
But unfortunately, I don't really think it came to light until like recent years,
mhm,
primarily with like COVID-19. And then, so much stuff related to HR came out, right? Like became more strategic in the views of like different owners and, leaders of organizations. And, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's been like a whole lot of push on like emotional well-being with staff since then. Um,
I
yeah,
would agree with that, and I think that I think there's a lot of focus on the ways in which a really comprehensive and thoughtful HR function, our responsibility is more of a leadership role, and we're not just kind of benefits admin monkeys anymore, right?
yeah,
We're not the principal's office anymore. There's a common refrain that I hear that says HR is not your friend. Um, and I really can't stand that one, right? Because I'm not working in the hospitality industry because I'm not friendly. I'm very friendly, and my job is both to, primarily ensure the health of the organization, the legality of the organization. But like, I'm not just sitting here in a building by myself. There's all these people who work here, and I can't have a healthy organization, an ethical, accountable, integritous organization if everybody who works here doesn't also participate in that. So I think with that change, and with sort of a lot of the items that fall under HR that are outside of what, I call it like the 1980s version, right?
yeah,
Of like you hire, you fire, you lay off, you do payroll, you administer benefits. It's so much more than that. And I'll be perfectly honest, and like my boss would tell you the same thing. Like, none of those things are my skill set. I'm not good at any of that. That was definitely not why they hired me. So I can do it, right? But I'm never going to
yeah.
excel at it. And I'm never going to do it at like a massive corporate level. But my skill set is really functional leadership, and teaching those principles. So I say I'd never be a teacher, and here I am being like, well, I teach people how to do it. So, but demonstrating those things and helping create a culture that supports a really healthy working environment. One of my favorite quotations is from the guy who kind of invented servant leadership,
Yeah.
which is you are made a manager and you choose to be a leader. But as a leader, you are responsible for the psychological, emotional, and financial well-being of your people. So we're going to talk about two of those.
Yeah. Maybe I'll have to bring you back for another one where we talk about the financials. So,
Not really my, I can spreadsheet
yeah,
pretty well. Never going to be a finance director.
yeah. So, I guess to kind of get started, I have a definition written down, right, of
Okay.
some notes that I took before this video, but I was going to see like what, well, I'll read this definition and let me know if you agree with it or maybe like what definition you would come up with
Okay.
if you were to make adjustments. But what I read online is that emotional well-being is our ability to regulate our emotions as we cope with the stresses and strains of everyday life and work. I mean, well, what are your thoughts on that definition?
I think that, it's not just that. I think that emotional well-being encompasses not just your ability to do it, but it
Mhm.
encompasses the emotional intelligence aspect, right? Which is
Yeah.
also, your ability to adapt to the needs of others, to pick up on some of the emotions of others, and not just like feel like your ability to cope or adapt, right? That it's the self-awareness, right?
Okay.
Of if we're going to take it to like the Brene Brown place of like, how am I feeling this in my body, right? What am I experiencing right now?
Yeah.
And how does that tie into some of my like basis instincts as a human being? And how do I escape from lizard brain and move into like a really emotionally healthy place? And as a leader, that consistency is so important, because I can't, it is unfair for me to ask people to show up to work emotionally healthy if I am not creating a place that is emotionally healthy. And just like with everything else, right, it always flows from the top down. So if your leadership team or if you as a leader are not embracing those things, right, and really working on your self awareness, your emotional intelligence, your ability to kind of read what others are saying, or they're not even necessarily saying it verbally, they're maybe saying it with their performance, with their
Yeah.
body language. I mean, there's a million different ways that you can look into it. One of my least favorite things recently has been the term quiet quitting. Like, OMG, they're not quiet quitting. They're wildly unhappy, and that is your fault, right? Like, we
Yeah.
cannot self care our way out of systemically bad leadership. So I can't be
It's
like,
true.
here's the EAP, if I'm not allowing you to take PTO, or I'm not providing the benefits that are reflective of the demographic of our organization, or if it's one thing for me but not for thee. So how do we kind of create that equity? And I think I have crawled into a rabbit hole, so please tell me to get out if you need me to. But like, the key concepts of DEIB tie into this a lot too. So people are a lot happier in workplaces where they have a sense of belonging. And you can tell people show up as your authentic self, but if what you mean by that is you have to fit into the culture that we have created, that's not what you're actually saying. You're saying show up as the authentic self that I want you to be, not who you
Yeah.
actually are. And so much of that falls out of what does DEI look like at your organization and how is it embraced?
Yeah. I mean, like we were talking earlier, I think so many different areas of HR are all tied together, right? So I
Yeah,
know
yeah,
in this video series, as I'm talking to all these different people, I feel like we're gonna, get into other topics as
yeah.
well. Um, one thing, I mean, I kind of forgot what I was gonna say there, but oh yeah, it's I've worked at a lot of, a handful of companies, and never surprises me because, like I hear people complaining about something, right? That in my HR brain, I'm like, oh, this is something that's going to affect their personal life
Hmm.
if it
Hmm.
continues, right?
Hmm.
And I start seeing, them complaining once or a second time or a third time. They're talking to people like water cooler talk, right, about something. Then, you know, me as the HR person, I bring it to leadership's attention, like, hey, how can we, should we review it, make adjustments? We don't, right? And then someone leaves. And then,
Hmm.
the supervisors or, CEO of the company or whoever is like, why did that person leave? I didn't know there was anything wrong. I'm like, what do you mean you didn't know anything was wrong? We like, this is like, as an HR person, I tell you, like, these are the issues, right? That we need
Right.
to improve on, from the staff, and like we just blatantly chose not to, like to an extent.
Hmm.
Sometimes for good reasons, such as financial reasons or
Hmm.
productivity reasons, but like, it's important to the staff member, right?
Hmm.
Um, and things that are
I
important to them.
think
Yeah, go ahead.
Right. Like, so you and I were talking, when we kind of started before we started recording, about there's sort of these two key components that you've got to have to be successful in HR. And one is that you have to like people, and the other one is that you have to want to help people. So, when you're in situations like that, it's really important to be able to untangle, like, is this one person's problem? or is this an organizational problem, right? Because
Yeah.
we cannot make changes at the organizational level because one person doesn't like something.
Correct.
So some really tactical ways that you can kind of get a read on where people are with those things is like you can do the pulse surveys, engagement surveys, you can do one-on-one check-ins, stay interviews, but again, it all falls to leadership. So if your leaders are conducting stay interviews, as they should, because it's not your job, as HR to do all of this stuff, right? But you can offer to you can sit in with them. You need to be reading their documentation. You need to be training them on how to do this. You need to be training them on how to be, not just physically present, but how to really employ that active listening, which is like after self-awareness is like step number 2 in emotional intelligence, right?
Yeah.
And reading those things so that we can all discern, like, that is such a good way to figure out what are the big things, right? And a lot of times those big things encompass the smaller things. So maybe the water cooler talk was one of the things under the big things that we need to start thinking about. But maybe it was
Right.
also just like the reality is some people just like to complain. So
No,
there's also that.
there is that.
So I think I don't know if you gave them this training, but I'm going to talk about it a
Yeah.
little bit now just so your students know about it. There's a great training called Mental Health First Aid,
Okay.
that's really awesome for I would recommend anybody in the workplace get it, but I think that it's really important for managers to have it because it does kind of give you this toolkit
Yeah.
of what to do when an employee comes to you with sort of a crisis of some sort, right? Um, and I think, there's a few different things. Like, obviously, I feel like your team in Antarctica, like, they're on a different planet,
They are. They are.
so that's a little, I mean, that's a really unique example, right? Of
Yeah.
like kind of and I'm not trying to say anything bad about your team in Antarctica by saying this, but it's kind of like the worst case scenario, right? So that's a really great thing to pull from as you're, like if you were to leave and to go into, corporate environment, it's sort of like you're not going to get shocked. And that's sort of, I feel like that's one of my big assets when I come to an organization is that I do have this background of very severe, very intense, substance abuse, mental health issues. So
Yeah.
like nothing shocks me. You cannot shock me. It's great. But mental health first aid is just a really good like stepping stone to creating kind of a safe space for a staff member or a teammate when they come to you and
Yeah.
express, something going on in their personal lives and being able to like connect them to some resources without placing the burden on yourself, right? Because they can get heavy. And
Yeah.
when you are the person that is open and willing to talk about these things, sometimes everyone talks to you about them.
Yes.
And it can be hard when you're the receiving other things that are really challenging for people to express all the time.
Okay. Mental health first aid. I haven't heard of that, so I'm gonna have to look it up for
Mm,
man, that's great. Because this topic, it's not like just you and I are talking about it, right? Like I feel like I'm constantly talking with HR professionals about
mm,
emotional well-being of staff, right? Um,
mhm.
and so I think that's just a good resource to have. I always get great resources from you. You're fantastic. Um, um, but the last question that I have is, with your background, right? Like you have a very unique background to talk about like psychological and emotional well-being, with the different places you've worked at, and experience. But how would you say, right, that like HR professionals, can strategically support that area, right, with like emotional well-being? Because I know as HR professionals, we're like the advocate for the employees a lot of times, or
Yeah,
we're like the bridge between like the like operational like CEOs and like the staff, right? Like
yeah.
how do you see that, strategically being supported from HR?
Um, know your leaders, right? Like what's going to make sense to your leader. Sherm's going to tell you present a business case, and that could make sense to your leader, right? So what's the business case, right? Do we want to look at the demographic profile of our staff team and say, here's what benefits make sense for this demographic profile. Here's what they've been using. Here's what they say they don't like. Here's what they say they want more of, right? And benefits, I'm not just talking about health insurance, right? I'm talking about, would it make sense for your organization to give a fully paid short-term disability benefit because you have a lot of people who are having children, right? Like that's going on here right now. We're in a baby boom. We've had 5 babies in a year. And we're pretty small. So we're like 30 people. So it's a lot, right? And that says a lot about what the demographic profile of our organization looks like. But ultimately, I say this a lot to managers, and I think it's a great thing to keep in mind, right? Is management is basically the serenity prayer. So control the things you can and let go of the things you can't, and know the difference. And a lot of times the only things that you do have control over, are the stay in your lane type things, because sometimes it does happen, and it could happen to some of your students moving forward, is that we kind of get told to stay in our lane. So affect change where you can, and that can be just on your personal interactions with people. People emulate behavior that they respect. And
Mhm.
so do that yourself. Think about, it's easier to start there sometimes. Like, I'm just gonna do like a really good imitation of like the best boss I've ever had instead of like, "Nah, I'm just gonna do whatever, right? Or I'm gonna try and learn about this like academic concept and then put it
Yeah.
into practice." So, I think I would consider myself a pretty strategic HR leader, but when you're building and maintaining a culture at an organization that supports emotional well-being and psychological safety, everything kind of falls into it, right? The comp and ben piece has to be right. I can't support your emotional well-being if you can't afford a place to live, right? So we've
Yeah.
got to build up from like that hierarchy of needs. And bringing in development activities for your team, keeping them professionally developing, make sure that you are creating an environment that allows for a thriving personal life. A really tactical thing, and I think it's getting better as people from our generational group are coming into leadership positions, but like a hot thing when I was an undergrad for our professors to tell us, which I genuinely hope you are not having to tell your people this, is like force your staff to leave when they have PTO. Like force them to go on vacation. But kind of, be the example there, responsibly help them manage that time off, and encourage them to take it, and encourage them to really take it. You are not checking email. You are putting an out of office response on. I am here to be your support person while you're gone. What do you need before you leave? How can I ensure that you really get to disconnect? And it things as simple as like, don't call people after hours. Is it really an emergency? And define that for your team, right? I
Yeah.
literally told people in a meeting, there are 3 emergencies. There's 3: death or dismemberment, building burns down, and mass walkout of staff. That's it.
It's the only reasons you call me after hours.
Yeah. Or while I'm on vacation, like, there are no other emergencies.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you for just all the information. I think it's a huge topic, right? And I think it's
Yeah.
a ever evolving topic, right? Like what we talk about now will be different in 10 years, right? Like,
Mhm.
because cultural norms change, right? What's important to people change.
Mhm.
Um, and, how to, one thing that I always try to think is like I'm well educated, right? Like I've had good jobs. I think I know a lot, right? But what I constantly have to tell myself is like, you don't know anything, right? Like sit down, listen to your people, and like refunction the way that I, as an HR person, think,
Mhm.
right? Because
Mhm.
it's easy for me to say like this way or the highway, when the
Right.
truth is like we need a side road, you know?
Right.
And I just need to, as an HR person, as things evolve, right? Like your staff evolves, companies evolve, nothing ever stays the same. And we shouldn't either, right? So
Right.
um, yeah, just doing what you can to support the team and take care of them, their
Yeah.
well-being. So
Yeah.
it's
Well, it's really been a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope that your students find some value out of this. And I am a resource for them. I am always available. So please do pass on my contact information. I would love to talk to some of them, and hype up working in the hospitality, travel, and tourism industry.
yeah,
Yeah, because it's a great industry, and I can't encourage people enough to get into it. It's a lot of fun. We have a great time. If you like working with some super fun weirdos, this is the place for you.
yeah. I, I am weird and I fit in the industry.
Yeah, yeah.
So um, perfect. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciated it. It's been great
Oh,
talking with you about this. So,
yeah, it's been awesome. I appreciate your time.
okay, well, have a great rest of the day. Okay.
Thanks, you too.
All right. Bye.
Bye bye.